Aqua friends, welcome to my channel. My name's Nicole and I have this wonderful autumn landscape for you today. Sorry about my voice, I've had COVID for the past 5 days and I'm kind of losing my voice here. So I have this gorgeous reference photo from Unsplash that I'm using, and I decided to wet my paper really well and to work a lot of the foliage wet on wet so that everything would be really soft. I haven't done a landscape in a while, so I'm playing it safe, as you can tell here by my really light colors. I'm going to start with all the light colors and sort of mapping, giving myself a road map and getting in the different colors where I see them in the reference photo. Some little spots of green, and then of course the autumn colors of the trees, the yellows and the oranges. And while everything's wet and I'm just dabbing this in right now, as you see, it spreads really well. This is kind of looking very impressionistic. But this is a good roadmap to follow. So I hope you guys stay watching after I've completed this painting, because I do have some bonus footage of an experiment that I wanted to try. I was thinking about painting it in a different way, and I wanted to be more bold and brave, and just to see how that would work out. So I hope you stay tuned to see the results of that one. Now the forest floor needs to be darker, so I am increasing the contrast here. I'm adding in more paint. I have a very pale purpley color I'm using for the distant trees. So my paper's still wet. You could tell this because the tree trunks are starting to get fuzzy, but that's okay. The ones in the background will be out of focus anyways, and the ones that are in the foreground, we're just going to go over those. It's kind of like our little roadmap for the next layer. So while things are wet and damp is a good time to put in the branches that are in the distance, just for a little added realism. I also did some splatters with my fan brush in the foreground, just for some textural effects. Now there are some shadows crossing over the road, so just adding those in. Adding in some textures on the forest floor. And with my sepia, I'm adding in some of those darker tones of the underbrush. So I'm building up those colors on the forest floor. And with a wet brush, a damp brush, I'm just blending that upwards into the forest through the trees, just so that it blends well. Now we're going to let that whole layer dry, and in our second layer, we're going to add in those front trees that are going to be nice and crisp because we're working wet on dry. Now the tree trunks, as it hits the forest floor, you're just going to take a damp brush and blend it into the forest floor. So damp brush, blend it in, and just like that, it just works out perfectly. At the same time that your tree trunk is still wet is a good time to take a script liner brush and pull out some branches. So that's how I'm going to be working this layer for the trees. I'm varying the colors of the trees as well. Notice that I'm not using the same colors all the time. So you want some that are more warm, some that are cooler. Use more water, less paint to paint in those distant ones. I'm working that left side the same as I worked my right side. And put little details like the knots and marks on the bark of the tree trunks is also a nice thing to do for a little bit of detail. Varying the colors and got more of a red color here for my tree. Decide where your light source is and darken one side of the tree as well so that it has a more three-dimensional look. So once all my trees are dry, I am lifting over some of the trees where I'm going to put the fall foliage, just so that it shows up better. So how I like to do my leaves is just basically meandering strokes with a very watery mixture of the different colors of paints that I'm using. So oranges, the burnt sienna, I do have ISO yellow deep, and I'm just dotting it in. Sometimes I also like to just use my paintbrush with clear water and do those meandering lines first, like I'm doing right there, and then dropping in the color. You'll get a lighter effect because you already have water on there, and then it dries, it mixes and it dries in a different way. Let me know in the comments below how you guys like to make your autumn leaves when you're doing a landscape. I would love to know your techniques and how you like to do it. What I did on one side of the painting, I'm going to do on the other, lifting some spots where I plan to put in some autumn leaves that are going to come in front of those trees. So things are still wet, and you see I'm dropping in some red, so it's kind of mixing with the other paints. I think it dried really pretty. So on my third layer, this is kind of like my tonal value correction layer. I felt like the floor of the forest wasn't dark enough and I needed to have more shadows across the road. So I'm just re-wetting the forest floor so I can add more paint here. So same colors that I've been using, the burnt sienna, burnt umber, and my sepia. And I'll just keep going darker until I'm happy with the results, until I think that I have enough tonal contrast. The final step is a little bit of salt. That is that. So I decided to be brave, and I wanted to know and experiment what it would be like if I soaked my paper first for 5 minutes. So if you've never painted on soaked paper before, folks, your paper will stay wet a really, 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 really long time, and your paint will spread for a long time. And everything dries very fuzzy, kind of like a dreamy scene, like very soft. So I decided to use really bold colors, and because I knew my paper would be wet for a really long time, I did not mix my paints with very much water. So I'm using a pretty thick consistency here, and it's all the same colors. It's just really, really bright because of the consistency I'm using. So same effects. I'm using some salt here um, along the forest floor, and some the foliage colors in the leaves. I'm just adding that, and I'm going to let that whole thing dry. Now once it's dry though, because it's not taped down, you will have to, depending on how buckled it is, you might want to retape your paper, which I ended up doing because mine was buckled there quite a bit. So you can see that salt really went wild. It's pretty cool, but it really washed out my road a little too much. So no problem, easy fix. You can just go over it with some more paint. So I just wet that area and I'm just adding in the same color paint. Little bit of details with a script liner brush. And then for your foreground trees, I'm just going over my tree trunks, wet on dry. And that is it. I did not add any more foliage to the trees. I just added the trunks in the same manner that I did with the other painting, with some darker and some lighter, so that you're showing that same sort of distance effect. So let me know what you guys think about this fun version, and I will see you next week. Thanks for watching.